Welcome back to Then and Now. I'm Julian Zelizer of The Long View.
And I'm Jonathan Alter of Old Goats.
You know, John, today or this week, when President Trump gave his 18-minute economic address, it made me think back to July of 1979 when President Jimmy Carter made his own address about the economy. Then the economy was in terrible condition. We faced stagflation, which was inflation and unemployment at the same time, and an oil crisis that left people waiting in gas lines and paying high prices to heat their home. And Carter famously, as you have written about in your biography, decided to give a speech. He postpones the first speech. He huddles in Camp David and meets with experts from all kinds of disciplines and walks of life. And then he gives the talk on July 15th, 1979, about a crisis of confidence. It's called the Malaise speech. He never said the word Malaise. But in that speech, he takes blame for his own failures, and he asks Americans to look at themselves for some of the reasons that we faced these economic and existential problems. And famously, in the weeks that follow, especially after he calls for resignations, there's a fallout from the speech. So I was thinking about how these two compare and curious about your thoughts.
Well, it's just impossible to exaggerate the contrast. So, you know, Donald Trump is all about him bragging, talking about how great he is. And Jimmy Carter, he starts the speech with a description of all of the criticism of him when he assembled a collection of Americans from different walks of life at Camp David beforehand. And he quotes the criticism. He says, Mr. President, you're not leading, you're just managing, one governor told me. Or, Mr. President, why don't you understand better what the American people want right now? It was astonishing level of candor. And then he went on, before he got to the energy policy part of his speech, to criticize American materialism and say that we had sort of lost our way in the United States by caring too much about money. Now, contrast that to Trump. Not only did he not use the word malaise in the speech, but the assumption that the speech was a failure at the time is also wrong. In fact, pretty much everybody liked the speech in the immediate aftermath, and his poll numbers went up. I had been an intern in the speechwriting office of the Carter White House the summer before in 1978, and I went and visited my friend Rick Hertzberg, who later became a New Yorker writer, who wrote most of that speech. And I visited him in the White House a day after Carter's speech, and Rick was very happy because it had gone well and the overnight ratings were positive. But then Carter made probably the worst or one of the worst decisions of his presidency, which is that he asked for the resignation of all of his cabinet members. And this just was a bad idea. A lot of foreign governments thought that, has the American government fallen? What's going on? He looked inept, and all of the goodwill that he got from the speech dissipated, and he went back down in the polls, though he later recovered somewhat. It was an astonishing speech. We had never seen anything like it before, and we will never see anything like it again. A president taking that much responsibility and that much blame. And I do think that after Trump, we will get a figure who in some ways resembles Jimmy Carter, somebody who represents the good in us, and that the next president will be that person, very likely from the Democratic Party. But even he or she will not do what Carter did and take all that blame onto themselves.
An important look back to 1979 in a stark contrast with what we heard this week. Thanks, John. And that's then and now, and we'll talk next week.
Thanks, Julian.